Okay, everybody, are we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to a special meeting of the Wards 2 and 3 Neighborhood Planning Assembly. It is so wonderful to be back in person at the Old North End Community Center and to see faces in the audience, so welcome everybody. And I'm Jess Hyman on the NPA Steering Committee, and here with me today are Steering Committee members Patrick Johnson and Charlie Giannoni on the camera. And we have a few other Steering Committee members who couldn't be here tonight. Barbara McGrew, Molly Flanagan, Kevin Duderman, Andrew Champlain, and Tony Reddington. And Tony sending you big well wishes. So we have a special night tonight. We have a candidate forum for the Ward 3 City Council election, which is coming up on August 17th. Everyone should have received your ballots in the mail. If you have not received your ballot in the mail yet, please contact the city clerk's office, and you have up to the 17th to turn it in, or you can vote in person then. Let's see, so we have a few announcements before we get started. There will be no NPA meeting in August, but we'll resume the regular schedule in September, which will be September 9th, and it'll be back in person here at the community center, and we'll also be celebrating the return of the community dinner. So Janet, yes, which is wonderful. Janet and her crew will be back serving up delicious food. And we're really grateful for the support from Channel 17 Town Meeting Television, which is streaming this live on YouTube, and also to CHT and Burlington Parks and Rec for offering us up this wonderful space again. So now is time for announcements. I have a quick announcement to make on behalf of Jeannie Waltz from The Ramble. The Ramble is on July 31st, the last Saturday in July. Fantastic event. People can still sign up to participate. If you'd like to get involved, go to theramble.org, and there's a sign-up sheet for events and more information. So don't forget, July 31st, The Ramble. So do we have any other announcements from the public? No?
I don't know. She's not giving me any details. It's an Old North End mutual aid party, and I will probably have details in just a moment.
Okay.
No need to announce it.
Okay, good. So we're waiting on details about the Old North End Mutual Aid Party. Details coming soon. Any other announcements? No? Okay, so we're very happy to have our 3 candidates for the Ward 3 City Council position here. We have Christopher Aaron Felker,
Thank you.
Owen Milne, and Joe McGee. And Patrick is going to be moderating this next part of the session, and I will turn it over to him. And if we get that announcement about mutual aid, we can jump in with it soon or later.
There was no way for the audience to participate in the questions, correct? No, the internet audience.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry about that. For those of you out there in Zoom land, this new hybrid model is kind of fun. Maybe we'll get used to it by September. For those of you who are out in Zoom land, you will be able to ask questions. So Liam and Kirsten from CEDO are on the Zoom, and if you have a question, use the Q&A function on Zoom, and then they will relay that question to us, and we will ask the candidates. Thank you.
We may try to facilitate if we get a bunch of questions about a specific topic. We will try to wrap all of those into one efficient question for the audience, the internet audience. But through an official method, we have determined that, Owen, you're going to go first with your opening statement. You guys are all familiar with the format we set up.
Thank you for letting me
And
come and
I'm sorry,
speak to
Chris, and then followed by Joe for the opening statements.
So thank you all for inviting me to, and all of us to be able to attend. It has been a great experience to learn and connect with the people of Ward 3 as this campaign has been underway. And I often get asked, why are you doing this? And I having been at the Community Sailing Center for a number of years now, have had the distinct pleasure of engaging closely with Brian Pine over the past number of years, and on more than a couple of occasions, I've been able to witness his approach to what I term to be servant leadership. A good example of this that I often kind of revert to is a particular moment when Ice Cream Bob, who owns the ice cream stand down on the waterfront, was about to get railroaded, literally, by Amtrak. And he received a notice saying that his business is going to be demolished and shut down. I'm part of a group of individuals that are organizational leaders or business leaders down on the waterfront, and had in that meeting he said to us, "This will be my last time here. I am going to be shut out of business." And I said to him, "Bob, hold on, don't hang it up just yet. Let me call Brian and see if there's something that he can do." And I called Brian, and he swooped in. He said, "This is unconscionable. We cannot set this precedent that we're going to let someone who's been working on the waterfront for 18 years get shut down in this particular manner." And I don't know what he did. I probably called Public Works and Parks and Rec and the mayor's office, and probably worked with a number of other city councilors to identify a solution and help Bob stay there. And I got a phone call from Bob not long after, and Bob said to me, "Owen, I don't know what happened or how it worked, but Brian was able to find me a new place on the waterfront. In fact, the new spot is almost better than where I've been for the past 18 years, and it gets to save my business." And and he said, "You've got ice cream for life. Thanks for the help." And he said, "Well, to be clear, ice cream for the rest of my life, not your life." So I say that simply because, that's the work of servant leaders. It's to listen carefully, ask the right questions, to really understand the challenge that you have in front of you, and then roll up your sleeves and solve the problem. If you do that often enough, people take notice. You do it well enough, and enough people are impressed by the work, and they keep sending you back time after time. And I believe in the idea of servant leadership, and will continue to move that forward.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Christopher Aaron Felker. I'm a husband, a veteran of the United States Navy, and since 2013, your neighbor, and the GOP nominee for Ward 3 in the City Council race. The last 8 years, you've likely seen me out walking my dogs through the neighborhood 6, 7, 8 times a day, especially if you live west of Champlain. I love the Old North End. I love the life that we've built here. We love Burlington, Lake Champlain, but most of all, we love how friendly and outgoing my fellow Burlingtonians are. Every single day, I go out and walk through our gorgeous neighborhood. Y'all are so happy and eager to come up and talk about what's going on in your lives and what problems you might have, and we can talk things out. And I absolutely adore that community that we have here. In the last 8 years that I have been here and we've made this our home, we have been happy to integrate and be part of this society, but I have had reservations about how there has been very little, if any, and in the past few years, no conservative representation or even voices represented during our electoral process. Ward 3 seems to have been a progressive stronghold for the last 40 years, and that's fine. And I think that my fellow Burlingtonians who live in Ward 3 that are progressives, they are very kind, considerate, good-hearted people. I just feel that it's time that we start having conservative voices in this conversation, because this is how we're going to solve Burlington's problems. We all come together. Each one of the three of us offers a different vantage point. None of us are perfect. We're all flawed human beings, just trying to do better every single day. And that's all we can do, is try and be better, try to come to the table, work out our problems, and find solutions together. This is how society's supposed to work, and this is how it's going to work from here on out. I appreciate the time that everybody has brought us together tonight. Again, I'm Christopher Felker, the GOP nominee for Ward 3, and I'm here to ask for your vote tonight. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Joe McGee. I use he and they pronouns, and I am a renter on North Champlain Street. I'm glad that we're all able to be back at the Old North End Community Center sharing physical space again, and glad that we have a hybrid model so that folks on Zoom can also participate as well. I hope that we can continue that model with a lot of our public meetings going forward. So, because we're not out of the pandemic yet, and it's going to be a vital part of our recovery efforts. So, I grew up in Vermont. I moved to Burlington 8 years ago to go to UVM. And my lived experiences and those of my family have kind of shaped my core beliefs and shaped my commitment to progressive movement building. My grandparents were married in 1951, and my grandmother is an Irish immigrant. My grandfather was a Boston firefighter who was killed in the line of duty on June 17th, 1972. And had it not been for the union benefits that the union fought for and won with the city of Boston, my grandmother and 8 other widows would have been left single mothers and had no safety net. So when I talk about issues of economic justice and the idea that the issues that we face, like housing, childcare, and income inequality, are interconnected, I'm speaking not just from theory but reality. We're not going to achieve racial justice without economic justice, without environmental justice, or without social justice. We have to fight for all of those together. And so that's why I'm proud to call myself a progressive. It's what's driven my work on each of Senator Sanders' presidential campaigns, his campaign for U.S. Senate. It's why I supported Max Tracy's campaign for mayor, and was proud to support Emma Mulvaney-Stanik's campaign for state representative, and so many other progressive campaigns throughout the years. So I'm running for city council to be a voice for working families in City Hall. For too long, the city has responded to the needs of the wealthy and the well-connected, while working families have shouldered a burden that's gotten heavier year after year. And I think it's time that we reverse that trend and uplift working people, uplift marginalized communities, and deliver true racial equity. So I'm committed to challenging the white supremacy that's inherent in our governing structure. I think we need to do a lot more to bring BIPOC folks into the governing process and do more to deliver true public safety that transitions away from policing and delivers more mental health support, and would also advocate for community control of police and support the resolution passed by the Public Safety Committee to give more power to the police commission while we get that charter change across the finish line in the State House. So I'm glad to be here tonight. I hope to earn your support in the special election on August 17th, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? I'll try to check. We have would you like any other? Hey, well, feel free. We'll try to get live questions before anything else. If you'd like to, if you don't mind, jumping up to the mic, or I can hand you the mic. If you would
Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, no, please go for it.
Yeah, my question is to Joe. And to identify myself, my name is Norm Fisher. That's spelled with a C, F-I-S-C-H-E-R. I always like to say that. And since I've been in Burlington for the last 5.5 years, I've published 4 BT Digger commentaries and 5 letters, and all of them are on free speech, except right before the election, I accused Trump and the Republican Party of abandoning republicanism. So my defense of free speech is from the left. And all of my letters dealt with 3 incidents in either Burlington or Vermont, okay? In Burlington, it's the attack on the downtown mural. You could have gotten rid of the mural without attacking free speech. You could have used arguments that didn't go against free speech, but it was a total attack on free speech. One of my letters was defending Paula Routley when her newspapers were attacked and taken over by Black Lives Matter and destroyed. And 2 of my Vermont Digger articles were on the sad and terrible case of Tiffany Riley in Windsor, who, for making a comment outside of her job as teacher and principal, she was fired in Windsor. And what I'd like you to do, Joe, is to explain whether you think Pierre Hardy, the painter who did the downtown mural, whether you think his speech, free speech was denied, whether you think Paula Routley's free speech was denied, and whether you think Tiffany Riley's free speech was denied.
If you don't, that is a really good question. I'd like all the candidates to be able to answer within the context of would you have done it better and with a nod to free speech. But Joe, since it was addressed to you first.
Sure. Well, on the subject of the mural, I think that is a public space, and it's up to our community to decide what's on that wall. And so I think that process was done right. I think the result was a good one. I think it should have happened sooner. And I think we need to have a real community discussion about the sorts of public arts that we're working on going forward. In the larger context of free speech, our words matter, and the Supreme Court has upheld that time and again, that you can't say whatever you want. If it harms people, then it isn't considered free speech. So I've got limited time here, but I'd love to talk more about that.
Owen, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so as relates to the mural, that project was commissioned to be a representation of our history, and the sheer fact that significant portions of our history was left out of that mural is what I understand to be the underlying factor of why that was the case. That was not somebody being commissioned to put up whatever they wanted on a wall. And so I fully stand behind the effort to revise, change, and ultimately bring that down. So I will always stand behind something that doesn't fully represent the entirety of our history, especially considering we live on Abenaki land. As relates to the 7 days, I felt, and I think many of the people in the community felt, very opposed to the manner in which that was handled, and ultimately its ending of the led to public dissent against that particular movement. So
All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to stick to be
Oh,
fair,
right.
of course.
So on the subject, I'll start on the broader subject first, and then I'll narrow down for you, sir. So on the subject of free speech, it's my belief that if you are an advocate of free speech, you advocate and you stand up for any speech, and that includes the people that you disagree with. It includes if they are saying something that you personally view repugnant. This is how we work as a society. This is the core principle of America. We come together and we solve problems. As far as the mural goes, I'm inclined to agree with you, sir. I feel like there might have been 3 or 4 other better ways to address taking down the mural as opposed to the avenue that we went. It was a very decisive tract and, very divisive tract that we went down, and it didn't need to be that way. The mural itself, while I guess they originally wanted it to be a representation of our history, it was a little much. There were actually even QR codes on it, so it came across more as a billboard than anything else. So if you wanted to get it taken down, you could have called it a billboard and said it violated Vermont law. So we didn't have to go down this really, truly divisive route where people were arguing with each other and calling each other nasty names. It didn't need to go that way. We could have handled it much better. But as far as free speech goes, it's absolute, as long as you aren't harassing somebody, threatening somebody, or yelling fire in a crowded theater. Thank you.
Important. Don't yell theater in a crowded fire department. Next question. Sorry, that's Steve Martin.
My name's Barbie Alsop, and I am one of the very strong progressives in this ward. And so I want to ask the 2 non-progressives, why on earth would I vote for you? Should I vote for you? Give me a good reason. And
Trying to be inclusive again, you should also make the argument that you are progressive if we don't know you for poor Joe down there. Well, let's just not assume.
I'm active for whatever progressive candidate is running.
Well, just so he has a chance to answer too.
Do you have a preference as to which one of us goes first?
So,
I frankly want to hear from both of you, so I don't care who goes.
Go right ahead, sir.
So I did seek the progressive nomination, and that was due in large part because I believe that a significant number of the ideas presented by the progressive movement are good for Burlington. And I don't necessarily, that I'm running as an independent. I would have liked to have been selected, but ultimately wasn't. If I was to give you a quick reason, it is that I have been very active in my community for many years, served on a variety of different organizational boards, both in the government sector as well as the nonprofit sector. And that has really given me a great perspective on a broad set of the needs that face the community in Ward 3.
So I think a lot of people get hung up on party affiliations. It's not necessary. I feel that kind of washed away. That is more prevalent in other parts of the country. And sometimes in this area it can, but we can transcend that. It's about the message. And all I ask, ma'am, is that you listen to what our campaign is presenting and the solutions that we have for Burlington. And if in your heart and in your mind you feel that those are good ideas, then I will ask for your vote. But if you are conflicted still, then follow your heart. But we're going to put out a positive message and a positive campaign with real solutions for the problems that I've seen in Burlington for the last 8 years. We're going to bring those to the table, and you'll decide. But I do ask for your vote, so I hope you give us you'll listen to what we have to say. Thank you.
Well, I am a progressive because I believe that we need to do more to advance climate justice. We need to do more to advance racial justice. We need to do more to advance economic justice. And we need to make bold changes now. We can't wait. Like, we saw videos the other day of the ocean literally on fire. We cannot wait for climate action. And we need to be vocal in supporting our trans neighbors. We need to be vocal in supporting workers in this city. We need to be vocal in supporting BIPOC folks and uplifting marginalized communities. And that's why I'm a progressive. That's why I'm proud to be endorsed by the Progressive Party for this race, and why I hope to earn your vote. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We have another question from Councillor Freeman. Yep. And again, please do with the other two. Yeah, give your name and what ward you live in.
I'm Perry Freeman. I'm in Ward 2. This question is mostly directed at Christopher, but other folks can speak on their opinions or thoughts on the issue. Myself, as a transgender person, I've felt discouraged and disappointed by your opinions and your positions on trans folks. We have a lot of trans folks, including myself, in the neighborhood who have health needs, social needs, cultural and economic needs. And I'm wondering can you explain to me how you're going to support trans folks like myself and other folks in the neighborhood, given that you've challenged my right to exist and other folks' right to exist as trans people? And other folks can speak to their stance on trans rights. Thank you.
So I do take a slight issue with the way that you frame the question, saying that I don't deny that your right to exist. You're standing here right in front of me, and you clearly do exist, Perry. We've had conversations many times, and I've been completely respectful to you every time we've talked. I've been asked this question before. I'm hoping that we can get through this. So I have stated on multiple occasions that I wholeheartedly and fully support equal rights for transgender people in our community. And I, as such, could and absolutely will be able to represent the transgender individuals in Ward 3. I'd like to point out that transgender individuals in Ward 3 already have fantastic representation from Ms. Perry Freeman herself, who is a transgendered individual who represents Ward 3 in City Council. So transgender individuals already have a very vocal and admirable advocate on council. Do you know who doesn't have representation on council? Conservative voices in Burlington. Thank you.
And Joe, would you like to take the next one?
Sure. First off, Perry uses they and them pronouns, so I want to make sure that we're getting that right. I, as a queer person myself, am also disheartened by Mr. Felker's comments. I think that Burlington needs to do more to support trans folks. We can always do more when we have to. This isn't really up for discussion. Trans rights aren't up for debate, and I don't think that anybody elected to public office should have at any point thought that trans people have any less right than anybody else to exist. And so if elected to the city council, I will work hard to advance policies that support trans folks, make it easier for trans folks to access health care, make sure that the community health centers are making outreach efforts to support trans folks, and do more to make sure that we have gender-neutral bathrooms in the city as well.
Thank you, Joe. Owen?
So I fully support the right of trans folks to exist. And the city can play a very important role to identify the obstacles that individuals face as they go about their day. In fact, one of the ideas, and it's on my website, around the ideas of accessibility and ADA is that there are things that can be done infrastructure-wise to actually not just improve things as it relates for those of us who have access issues related to mobility, but actually to look at things on a broader spectrum to include how we can use that methodology to actually improve the lives of that go beyond just those that have been traditionally considered in the ADA. Essentially I'd be working towards a plan that would actually incorporate a lot more of those facility improvements that aren't just part of that law that was passed in 1993.
Thank you very much. So if there are any points of this you'd like to revisit or discuss further, you all have a minute if you'd like to take that minute. If somebody says something you'd like to respond to. Just throwing it out there. We have another, Jessica?
There's a question from Zoomland.
Yeah, please do, please do.
And I'm short, see? Hi there, good evening. Thank you to the neighborhood for putting on this forum. This is really great. My question is about public safety.
Could you give your name if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Wendy Wilton.
And you're located Ward 2 or 3 or not?
I'm actually outside the city of Burlington, although my roots are here.
Okay,
And
that's
my
fine.
mother went to school in this building, by the way. Anyway, but my concern is actually a regional concern, and that's why I'm here tonight. It's about this regional concern. And my regional concern is about policing. It's about public safety in Burlington. And I think what we've seen over the last year is those cities that defunded police now have terrible problems with vandalism, theft, and increasing crime that is leading to more violent crime. So my concern, Burlington being the largest city in Vermont, of course, and in the regional community of Chittenden County, if Burlington doesn't have a strong policing, and that includes community policing also, by the way, and, you know, modern efforts at policing, which Burlington, I think, has had a proud history of. But if Burlington defunds their police and doesn't keep control on crime, that will also be a regional problem. So that's why it concerns me, but I think people in Burlington have that concern as well. Many do. So I'd like to hear each candidate respond to, are they supporting defunding the police? And what is their plan going forward to make sure that Burlington stays safe? Thank you.
So I'm going to jump in here. That's a pretty big question. It's on my list, reimagining, refunding. So if we don't mind, 2 minutes. If you can do it in under 2 minutes, good luck. But please offer specifics to people and avoid the general statements. You know, you can choose to generalize all you wish. But since a lot of people can't be here to critique your statements, try to be a little bit more specific to policies that have been enacted, things you would like to enact. And Joe, you would be next to go first.
Okay, great. So I do support transitioning away from the traditional structures of policing and funding mental health services and unarmed civilians responding to folks who are experiencing mental health crises, nonviolent calls that are coming into our police station. I do not support these calls to raise the cap on the officers that the council set last summer. I think we need to continue to be bold in coming up with solutions to move away from a militarized police force, and we need to back that up with funding and be able to show up and envision a future that for public safety that supports BIPOC folks and really involves them in the process. I think that will be essential in this search for our next police chief. We need to find somebody who is going to show up and be willing to have those conversations very frankly and not have an adversarial relationship with the community, and making sure that, you know, the police department is using the resources that they have correctly. I think, you know, the recent 7 Days story showed that that might not be the case. So when we talk about instances of violent crime, I don't want that to turn into a scare tactic or fear-mongering when we're having this conversation about reimagining what public safety can look like in the future.
Very good. Owen, is that good?
Yeah, so I don't believe in defunding the police, but rather a transition away from the police department being a singular entity towards actually establishing a Department of Public Safety, Health and Safety in Burlington. What that would look like is to actually, we've already taken parking enforcement away from the police department. We would be transitioning the police department into a department with a focus on social service rather than just a department that's solely focused on law enforcement. And this is actually what's being proposed and looked at in Minneapolis right now, which is this change towards having accountability look at instances that don't just look at correcting issues of violence, but also to reward actions that transition us towards a more healthy and safe community. So an important part that the council is going to play in the next 6 months is actually to hold the police accountable to the outcomes that come from the consultants. We really need to work to make sure that what we find of how our resources are being used matches the needs that come up from that. So what we'll be doing is essentially on city councils to make sure that we aren't having all of our officers working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when the greatest needs that we have might be in those other shifts where most of the actual violence takes place. So this is about shifting those out and reallocating those resources to what our community actually needs.
Thank you, Owen. Chris?
Thank you. So this actually is an area in which there is the most stark contrast between me and my opponents. Our campaign has put forward a positive policing policy that does add funding. We were talking about funding. So we're talking about adding funding, adding officers, and adding and embedding social workers and mental health workers in the department, so that way some of the burden can be taken off of the armed sworn officers. When we talk about adding funding, this is the way that we're going to retrain our police officers to make sure that they are community-oriented. We want to add funding, we want to add officers, so that way we can bring back foot patrols through our neighborhoods, that they are able to build a rapport in their community. This is how we rebuild trust between our community and our police department. Also, on the subject of adding officers, we need to bring back street patrols, the street crime unit, and this city, a city of this size, needs to have an animal control officer, a sworn animal control officer, to handle any kind of incidences of animal abuse or neglect or anything along that subject. This is, again, it's still adding officers and adding funding. This is how we're going to keep our community safe. The numbers bounce around, but Chief Murad is asking for 98 officers. The mayor has asked for 85. The number needs to be negotiated out, but we need to bring the number up to whatever it takes to make sure that we get foot patrols back, that we get street crimes back, we get our city safe, and we add an animal control officer. In the last year, we have seen, since officers were cut, we have seen a rise in assaults, simple and aggravated, including sexual assaults. We've seen a rise in quality of life crimes, including vandalisms and burglaries. We can do better as a community, but we need to make sure that the officers have the funding they need so that way they can have the training to be better. Thank you.
Any quick rebuttals? Interjections, differences of opinion? We'll move along if not.
I don't necessarily believe that retraining works. Tactically trained officers, they're great people, but they have the bias to see things in one way of responding. What I would be proposing would be to actually not necessarily reduce headcount of people within the department or the Department of Public Safety and Health, but increasing people who come from a social service background rather than trying to train an officer with a tactical background into having a social service understanding.
Good, thank you. Joe, do you have any other additional comments? You're good. Right. Jessica.
Can I follow back up for a second?
Yes, you can. You have 1 minute.
Thanks, Owen. You said in your prior statement that you didn't want to defund the police, but you don't think they can be retrained, and you don't want to hire any more sworn officers. that really sounds like defunding the police to me. Also, it's part of our platform that we want to embed social workers and mental health workers because they have a very unique perspective and ability to be able to help us de-escalate situations. But I don't feel comfortable sending them in to investigate criminal activity. And I don't think that that's what we should be sending our social workers. And I don't think that you're being a good steward to our city and our city workers if you're putting them in harm's way.
So I guess we're going to be a dialogue here, but if we're going to get into that, try to keep it succinct, which dialogue is good. Joe, if you'd like to respond, since you haven't had a chance.
Well, if we want to be talking about being a good steward of city resources, then adding more police officers is not the way to do that. We absolutely need to ensure that we have public safety, but we're not going to do that by reinforcing a status quo that hasn't worked for so many people in Burlington. And so we need to move forward with a bold vision for reimagining public safety. I recognize that we have a workforce development issue when it comes to mental health workers in this state. We saw it during the pandemic, and we're seeing it still now. We need to work with our state leaders to make sure that we are using all of the resources available to us, whether it's from the legislature or on a city level, to ensure that these programs are well-funded and can be staffed with experienced people. So I recognize that we won't get there tomorrow, but we cannot just revert back to what hasn't worked in the past.
Okay, thanks. Oh, and if you want to keep it just quick so we get to the other report. Thank you.
So you don't need to dramatically change the budget of an organization, and restructuring organizations happens all the time without addressing a budget. And this is about changing the allocation of how we police to match the needs of what actually is going on the ground. Do we need armed officers making traffic stops when very, 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 very few instances of a traffic stop would require a tactical response? The department can do a better job of making sure that armed tactical presence is used appropriately and in the right times.
Good, thank you very much. Jessica has a question from the audience.
Yeah, there's a question that came through on Zoom, but unfortunately I could only see it for a moment and it disappeared, so I'm going to try and remember it. And if the person could ask it again, that would be wonderful. But I believe the question was, if elected, what would be your passion project on the council?
Owen, you were up next.
Oh, me?
Yes,
Really?
if you don't mind. 1 minute?
So over the past number of weeks, I've been making many calls to people in my neighborhood. Housing keeps coming up every single time. So my passion project as a servant leader is to address the issue that seems most pressing for the people in Ward 3. That would be it. So this term is really only 6 months. So you can't solve housing in 6 months. Two of the things that I'd be focusing on would be looking to see if we can actually create a condominium, a pathway to ownership, so that by city ordinance, at the point of transition in properties, that tenants have to be given the opportunity to band together to actually own it and turn that wealth into the hands of tenants. And then the second would be to really take a hard look at short-term rentals. I believe that there's a significant amount of wealth that stays within short-term rentals, and we can change that.
Thank you. Chris, if you don't mind.
So this is a great subject, and I'm happy to talk about it. So yes, housing security and housing options are one of the main issues that other Burlingtonians bring up to me also. And like Owen said, it's a very complex subject, and we could hardly do it justice in a minute, but the way that we can really provide reforms in our society that make the difference. We can reform the use zoning of a property, so that way you can go from a single house to duplex to triplex to auxiliary dwelling units. We need to change what our criteria is for the historic districts, and we need to reform home ownership, because there is nothing in Burlington that you can purchase in the entry-level market. So if you are in, we need to relax some of the restrictions that allow some of these smaller dwelling buildings to be able to be converted into condo or co-op type style housing. That's how you create wealth in your community. That's how you build wealth from scratch. That's how you pass it down, intergenerational wealth, to your children. And we currently don't have that. So we have to also, in addition to building and opening up new rentals, we need to open up that entry-level market for all Burlingtonians. Thank you.
We could go into housing. That's a whole nother level of.
It's hard to get in a minute, you know.
Really hard, but it is a passionate project. So, Joe.
Well, you know, with the 6 months left in the term, I would really look to strengthen the livable wage ordinance and do more to support part-time and gig workers in our city. I think that is a crucial step, in addition to the many things that we need to do on with housing and to make housing more affordable, whether it's rent stabilization or making it easier for folks to buy a home in the city. We also need to make sure that people in the city are earning a fair wage, and a wage that makes it possible for them to live where they work. And so, you know, my sister is a part-time worker who lives in the Old North End, and I would love for her to be able to stay here, but that's been a difficult task for her. So, you know, we need to support renters, we need to support workers, and that's what I hope to do on the council.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do we have any other audience questions? No. There is one there. I'll quickly gonna interject. So 2 charter changes we just recently had. I'm going to stick to just 2 of them. The no cause eviction, both of these 2 passed, and the instant runoff voting, IRV, that passed. Now, it still has to go through the state and then come back and revised. Would you be willing to share your views on those 2, no cause eviction and IRV? And if you disagree with them, what would you propose? Chris, you're first this time.
Okay. So, I actually am opposed to both of these charter changes, and the reason for my opposition to the no cause eviction or charter change was because I feel that property owners, the way that the charter change is worded, it requires that property owners renew the lease for the tenants even though the contract is ended. So it's really taking away contractual property rights of the property owner, and that's what I have issue with. As far as ranked choice voting goes, I feel like voting should be easier. The UVM Legislative Research Shop came up with the study that evaluated ranked choice voting. They talked about the 4 paradoxes that are associated with it, but ultimately what it boils down to is ranking votes only is effective. People participate in this who have higher level degrees. So there are people, if you have a high school education, a GED, if English is your second language, if you're a new American, you are less likely to rank votes. And if you're less likely to take advantage of the situation, who's it really benefiting? We're just making it more difficult for people, which is discouraging to people. I want to make voting easier. Everybody can have a ballot. It's very easy, but the city chose to go the way they went. So thank you.
That was a mouthful.
And point of clarification, the charter change is a just cause eviction charter.
Sorry, just cause eviction. Yes, it is not just semantics. And Joe, would you like to finish up?
Sure.
It's actually not IRV this time, isn't it? Well, I think it's actually rephrased now or repackaged. I can't remember. Joe.
Sure. Well, I strongly supported both of those charter changes. I think just cause is an important step for us to make this rental market more favorable to tenants. I think it's very adversarial for tenants right now, and it's a hostile market for tenants. I think we need to do more to support renters in the city. And as for instant runoff voting, I think, the reasoning for not doing something shouldn't be that it's not easy. We have the resources. If we dedicate ourselves to it, we can educate folks how to vote. That should be the very core pillar of our democracy. IRV is going to give us a more representative democracy, and I think that is a small ask for our democratic process.
Okay, Owen.
So I support both of those initiatives. Also, being the independent here, I can say that I am in favor of IRV. I think it encourages people to get involved in the electoral process and encourages people to run. And it actually strengthens our democracy by improving how people choose and better control over their voice.
Great. Any follow-up rebuttal on that one? No, and it's ranked choice voting now, not IRV. Sorry. Jessica has another audience participation question.
So this is another question from the Zoom audience. The question is, as a member of the City Council, will you encourage the governor to use the state's authority over training the Vermont National Guard to order a halt to the F-35 training over Burlington and in any populated area?
Very good question. I believe, Joe, you are next to go first. F-35, yes, no?
I absolutely think we need to do whatever we can to halt the F-35 training flights. I think, the city voted in 2018 to not have the F-35s based here, pretty overwhelmingly. Ward 3 especially voted pretty highly to not have the F-35s based here. And I think everyone's concerns have been proved time and again since they have been here. They aren't just a nuisance, they are a danger to people's mental health. They're a danger to childhood development, and they absolutely should not be based anywhere near a populated area.
Excellent. Owen.
The question was, would you would you reach out to the governor to do it? I actually think that the stronger political target would actually be to focus on our Sanders, Welch, and Leahy to actually help them reverse it at the federal level, which is actually where it'd have a better chance of overturning that legally. So what I would recommend and how I would go about doing that is actually create a coalition of support of city councils of both Winooski, South Burlington, and Burlington to approach it. And then also work with one of the greatest areas of defense for keeping them there is the $3 million in support services that they provide. In working with Beta Technologies wasn't really there before, and other entities that benefit from the airport. I would actually work with those organizations to try and have investment coming from them in addition to what we would be able to do as a collective coalition of cities to fund for that.
Okay, thanks.
I have no problem with the F-35. I support the Air National Guard, but what I would do is I would encourage residents and make sure that we have adequate funds so we can retrofit their houses with new windows and soundproofing so that way they can have the safety and security that they deserve. They also deserve to be able to retain the value of the property by being able to put new windows and new soundproofing in. We're increasing the property. We're landlocked here. We've got little places where we can build out. So it is what it is. We can improvise, adapt, and overcome, and we can make this situation great. I lived on a Navy base for years. I'm very accustomed to hearing jets fly by. I hear them, I look up. By the time I take 2 more steps, they're gone. So I'm fine with the F-35, and I understand that might not be a popular opinion in this room right now, but it is what it is. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for sharing your opinions. Do we have another question from the audience? Anybody else?
We do have 2 more Zoom questions, but I would love to.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Chuck Wilton, and I don't live in the city, but I utilize the city quite a bit. I've worked for a couple of companies here and so forth, and it is the county seat, so to speak. And I have been involved. I lived in Rutland for a number of years. I was the chair of the redevelopment authority there. And I hear us talking about a lot of social issues here, and that's wonderful. But the bigger picture is you've got a big entity to run here in this city, and I hear nobody speaking about the nuts and bolts of the business of running the city and how you would go about directing the business of running the city. I mean, everybody likes to not think about it, but without the business of running the city, you don't have anything. So I want to know what your thoughts are there. Thank you.
So maybe give us the detail of your understanding of the civics, your responsibilities, which is actually probably a great question. As a city councilor, are you going into this eyes wide open? We have 2 city councilors here that work entirely too much and get paid entirely not enough, in my opinion. Are you ready to take on that? Owen, you would be next.
Sure. So I've served on over 10 different nonprofit boards and government entities across the state. One of the things that also having an MBA, really helps me to understand is what the nuts and bolts of city or organizational finance looks like. So I can tell the difference between a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement. And so I really enjoy getting into the detail of understanding what is going on, what is the story behind the numbers, and to align policies to actually address not just the needs of the people of Ward 3, which is important, but also to make sure that we are being financially responsible in our way of aligning our resources to the needs that exist within the community.
Chris.
So the question was, how am I going to ensure that we have an efficient running government? Perfect. So I'll begin by saying that I'm not going to waste the city's precious time by grandstanding or being tied up with any virtue signaling or any kind of other shenanigans. We need to be good stewards to our city, and the best way we can do that is by ensuring that we are being fiscally responsible, that we are properly investing in our communities and in our sidewalk infrastructure. Sidewalks connect our communities. If we are telling our neighbors to please shop local, but the sidewalk infrastructure hasn't been updated in 30 years and is deteriorating, we're failing to fulfill our obligations. Owen brought up earlier, the ADA was passed in '93. And it was one of George Bush's crowning achievements. It's a promise that we open up our society to people with all abilities, and our sidewalk infrastructure is in horrible condition. We need to update this. We need to do this more and more every year. We've only been putting out 3 miles of updates every year, and if I'm elected to City Council, I will promise you that we will double that every year until we get our sidewalks and our communities connected. Sidewalks connect us to the marketplace, they connect us to churches, to social organizations, and to vital public services. They keep people healthy and they drive down healthcare costs. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Joe.
Sure. So I've been lucky enough to serve on the Board of Tax Appeals for the last 3 years. I'm fortunate enough to have been reappointed recently. So I have participated in our city government. I know how it runs. I've attended city council meetings, and I understand the responsibility of the council to keep the streets paved and keep the sidewalks in working order. And at the same time, I recognize that it's the job of the city council to be the voice of the people in City Hall. And that is exactly what I hope to be if I'm fortunate enough to be elected as the next city councilor for Ward 3. You know, we have the resources, and the city council has the ability to do a lot more to support the people of Burlington, and that is as much their job as it is to keep the city running. So that's what I hope to do. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to move on, if I can, to another pressing question. The tax reassessment has gotten a lot of people a little bit nervous. The interworkings of it may be a bit difficult for the average Ward 3 citizen to understand. What is your impression of the tax assessment? And if it wasn't fair, how would you fix it? And you're next to go first, Chris. I believe.
I've heard a lot of people complaining about their tax reassessments lately, and sitting at coffee with the mayor on Wednesdays, they come there and they talk about it. And the mayor's office has even said that if you feel it's too high, you should file an appeal, and that half of the appeals are being granted. So that's telling me that there was something deeply flawed with the metrics that we use to reassess our tax. And so I'm right on the page with any of you out there who are really scratching your heads at the math that they tried to use for this. So we need to reevaluate the metrics and the tools that we use to evaluate this. And I can tell you, I promise you here today, that I'm probably the only candidate on this stage right now that will fight to hold the line on taxes and keep Burlington affordable. Thank you.
Okay, Joe.
I have also heard from a lot of folks that they got a little sticker shock with the reappraisal in April, but you know, it's also important to understand that that doesn't necessarily mean a dramatic increase in taxes. And you know, if I'm elected to the council, would like to explore moving away from a property tax system and moving towards a progressive income tax system for funding the city. I think that is much more equitable, and I think that is something that we need to look at more. So, thank you.
Great, thanks. Owen.
So it's an important distinction that, you know, a significant portion of our property taxes is aligned to the education for the state of Vermont. So, you know, that is a burden that we all, well, an investment that we all share in. There isn't a whole lot that can be done around changing those things at the statewide level. What I think could have been done is that there should have been better communication to the residents of Burlington of how it was going to be rolled out, to better education as to understanding of what the process was going to look like, better understanding among all of us of what we should have been expecting for that before it came. I don't believe that the process that was used, you know, within City Hall set us up to reduce that expectation and that sticker shock.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So this question from the Zoom says, the progressive candidate, Joe, sounds like every other progressive on city council. How is this, how are you different, and why do we need another redundant progressive voice on the council? Question from Zoom.
Okay. Well, I fully stand by my progressive peers on the council. You know, they've faced a difficult task over the last year, legislating in Zoom and really working to engage the public. And, you know, if I'm fortunate enough to join them after the August special election, you know, I think we recognize that we need bold changes to address the many issues that we face, and that we cannot continue down a path of a status quo that doesn't work for so many people in the city. And, you know, I will be somebody who listens to the community, engages the community, and offers a listening ear, and provides representation for everybody in the ward, especially folks that, you know, I understand that we need to do more to provide constituent services and everything like that, and that is absolutely what I hope to do on the council. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to move on to the larger questions. New high school, it's a bit of a debacle. We've already approved a budget. It was, we passed a bond, which was quite large. And I'm going to conflate here two questions. The big dig, the current location of the high school, and the need to relocate and rebuild. Correlation of any of those things, or do any of you have a plan in mind that may incorporate those three things that are opportunities, perhaps, instead of chaos? And Owen, you are next to go. Oh,
yeah. Okay. So, trying to understand what the question is.
Well, the question, there's a lot of, the big dig is there. Our high school has failed its environmental inspection. Is there a possibility to acquire the big dig, in your opinion? Fill that hole with a nice, new, shining high school, since the high school is already there. That quagmire we have in our city center hasn't gotten any better.
Yeah,
it's a complicated question, and I was trying to be more specific than larger, the dig.
So I'm going to address those separately, if that's okay. So, you know, if it's my understanding, there's a number of sites under review by the school board, and I also understand that the city council doesn't necessarily have a significant amount of say in kind of that selection process of where they end up. I will support, you know, whatever decision comes of where that high school needs to be relocated. I'm not opposed to the idea of there being an academic campus that's separate from an athletic campus. I know that's been something that's been a bit of a hang-up for folks too. I also, as it relates to the Big Dig, would like to see effort undertaken for the city to get better legal control over the property on which the pit currently resides, and then make sure that it is contributing towards a tax base in the downtown of Burlington.
Chris?
Perfect. So the school's a big issue. It's really disappointing to hear about how contaminated the site is. It's depressing to hear about how expensive remediation is going to cost, and it's a conundrum that we're in, and it's unfortunately got our neighborhood children stuck in the middle. So do I support taking the town center place and turning it into a school? No, I don't, because I want that to be houses. Burlington needs more homes, and that offers us over 400 new homes. The city has kicked around the idea, including the mayor's office, of using Memorial Auditorium. You know, that's definitely an option. Like Owen said, I don't think the council necessarily has much say, but I'm interested to see what the remediation costs are for the site on, what is that, Industrial Avenue, or on North Avenue up there, because it's really important that we update our school and we add some vocational training to that also. So that's where we're at. We got to need houses. We can't take that and turn it into a school.
And Joe?
Yeah, so I've spent a lot of time talking to folks about this, and, you know, I understand that the school board is undergoing a process of finding a new site and figuring out what the best path forward is. You know, I think we were all kind of shocked that this was going to be sort of the direction that we needed to go with the high school, that we need to move it from the current location. And so, I think this is an issue that we're going to face and we're going to see statewide as well. There are plenty of other schools around the state that were built around the same time. So looking for working with state leaders to see if there are state funds available for this, and working with our school commissioners to engage the community and really figure out what our families need is going to be essential. So I would look forward to working with the school commissioners in the Old North End and around the city to come up with a solution that works for our families and our kids.
Alrighty. Do you have another?
So there's one more question from Zoom, and the question is, what will you do to make our city safer for transgender Vermonters who face discrimination in housing and jobs?
And Joe, you are next to go first.
Great. First off, we have to say loudly and clearly that trans rights are human rights. And the city has a lot of work to do to make sure that we're being inclusive in terms of healthcare and job opportunities. Recognize that that there is still that discrimination that happens here in our state, and do whatever we can to counter that. So, I, as a queer person, want to make sure that I am being a voice for trans folks on the council, and really making sure that trans folks know that they are welcome in Ward 3, and engaging folks on what their needs are here in the city and how we can work to improve that on the council.
So I'd echo a little bit of what I had said earlier about incorporating trans needs into our physical environment, to expand enforcement for ADA and actually lead the nation. We have an opportunity to roll trans rights into that. I would say the city also, in the same way, has made strident efforts to publicly support BIPOC community. We can be doing the same thing for trans individuals in Burlington and as well. The city is a tremendous opportunity, and especially city councilors, to demonstrate that those values that we all hold dear. And I would be using the opportunity of representing Ward 3 to elevate those voices and bring them to the public forum.
So I would use my role on council to ensure that we are advocating for the equal rights of all Burlingtonians, making sure that we are that no Burlingtonian is facing any kind of discrimination when it comes to access to housing or in public accommodations or at work. So we'll continue that work because it's important. Thank you.
Alrighty. I have a list of other questions here, but housing is one I'm going to go back and revisit if you guys all don't mind. Can you offer any specifics? The housing prices in the last year have alarmingly jumped. There's a lot of prospectors out there mining the Airbnb market. How is that going to affect the rest of us who want to live here in a full-time? Do you have any suggestions that will help reduce that? And as well as student population that currently lives in Burlington, and how UVM facilitates them with us and how that affects. Does that make sense?
So you're asking about how to
Trying to give,
Airbnb?
well, no, the larger housing issue, I was trying to parse it into a lot of those things are contributing to escalating home prices, and we've seen speculative market for Airbnb and student rentals have affected the market probably greater than any other things. from what I understand. If I'm wrong, please interject. If you have an opinion on those two things and how you can change them to affect the market. And Owen, you're next.
Yeah. So, so specifics on housing. We have to work to bring more affordable housing to Burlington in order to try and reduce that overall cost through growing the housing stock and making sure that we are managing the percentage of that housing stock that is affordable housing. So one way that I'd be doing that, something that I've been thinking through, is increasing our investment of community housing trust within Burlington. There are a couple of ways of funding that. Some of those are on my website, but actually through taxation and regulation of our Airbnbs and the short-term rentals, actually reinvest that in community housing trust. Another thing that I proposed and wanted to look at more deeply is potentially even charging for on-street parking in residential areas, and using that as another way to increase our investment in community housing trust.
Okay, it's a large question. Chris?
Okay, so for housing, as it stands right now, the city Airbnbs make up less than 2% of our rental market, and they're short term. Many of the Airbnbs are owner-occupied duplexes where, for their own personal choices, they've decided to take their duplex unit rental off the market and do some and operate as an Airbnb. It's a lot more work going that route. Instead of having to clean the place once a year, you have to do it practically every weekend. You're constantly rated by the people coming in, so you're always on. When it comes to solving our housing problems, VT Digger estimates that 60% of Burlingtonians are renters. That number is very high, disproportionately high than most other cities, and we need to find many of those people who are renting because they're forced to. There's nothing to buy in that entry-level market, $250,000 to $350,000. And you're right, this is a supply and demand issue, and that lack of open entry-level housing only drives up the cost even more. So we have to find solutions. We have solutions. It's on our website, and we'll solve Burlington's housing crisis. This subject needs more than 1 minute, for real.
Well, yeah, Joe?
Sure. So, as I said earlier, I support looking at policies for rent stabilization in the city, strengthening our inclusionary zoning ordinances, and I think, we've got lots of money coming into this state from the federal government for new affordable housing units, making sure that we're investing those wisely here in the city and doing more to support Burlingtonians on fixed incomes. I think it's vital that we continue to do more to support workers. We passed just cause eviction. We need to do far more to support renters and make it easier for folks to buy homes. We need to explore policies to increase BIPOC home ownership and make it possible for folks to build equity in their housing. We've got. Sorry. Thank you.
Do you want to stick with the 1 minute responses?
Yeah, well, you feel free to 30-second response. Yeah. Sorry.
Sure. Well, I think we need to do more to see what the city can do to support folks who are looking to buy their first home, and do more than just HFA loans and stuff like that, and see if there's a way that the city can support those efforts as well. So.
Okay. Sorry, I did give you a bunch more time as I was trying to consolidate the questions here. Owen, would you like to add any more?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. To be fair, yeah.
So you asked for specifics. I would look to reduce minimum parking requirements. So at present, we have ordinances that require new construction to also incorporate more parking. And as if we're going to move away from fossil fuel industry, then getting that reliance off of that transportation is something that will actually boon and help our ability to build more housing. I would also be taking a look at, and I had mentioned this earlier, creating a city ordinance that would, again, require at the point of sale or transaction, right of first refusal to tenants to actually work together to own their own property. In the event, and there are other entities across the country that have actually created housing co-ops around that entire model. And that's something that we could be doing in Burlington to address that issue as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Perfect. So on the subject of housing, we have proposed multiple regulations, reforms to the regulations and the zoning in the city to modify the single-use land tract to multi-use. That will open up more opportunities to build and infill housing. It also allows us to create auxiliary dwelling units. We have to modify our historic district markers. This is a big, big obstacle to providing the housing that we need and bringing the Renaissance back to the area where we can have new builds and we can create more housing. We also can relax the regulations that limit the property owner's ability to convert to a condo co-op type property, so that way the current landlords can still be managing the properties, charging a small HOA that'll cover municipal waste and water and taxes, but they can sell the individual units on the market. I know many people I have bumped into on my walks through Burlington have said, you know, I'd be really happy to buy a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment in Burlington, but there's just nothing out there that we can do. So if we can relax these regulations and make it easier to facilitate landlords doing this, then we are building that wealth from the ground up. We can buy our own individual apartments. We can sell them when we want to. We aren't locked into a lease. That is housing security right there. And that's a big part of the solution that our campaign's putting forward. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a bunch of perennial issues here that I'm going to quickly go over before we do our closing statements. We in Ward 2 and 3 love the Champlain Parkway, at least to talk about it. And one of our steering committee members has worked ardently to make sure it is an equitable avenue if it ever gets developed. We'll start with Chris, your opinion on the Champlain Parkway.
This subject predates me, and I'm 42 years old.
Yeah, pretty much everyone here, but
yeah, it's
but we're gonna. I'm sorry, quickly though.
Sure, quickly. Let's talk about it. Sure. So, you know, I know it's a point of contention for many people, but the truth is we really need to be good stewards to our city, and we need to make sure that we create the roads and the infrastructure that we need, not for today, but for the next 20 and 30 years. That's being a good steward to our city. So if we need to reevaluate, reexamine, and these new road infrastructure projects, then so be it. But we need to get the ball rolling and we need to get it done, because for far too long we've been weighed down in this. Are we going to do this? Are we going to do that? And nothing gets done. So we need to build up our road infrastructure, because it's a nightmare as it is.
Good, thanks. Joe?
So we need to examine the Champlain Parkway project. It cannot go through as it currently is. It's not equitable. It's not just. I would support the Rail Yard Enterprise project to make sure that the Champlain Parkway isn't going through a densely populated BIPOC neighborhood, and make sure that we need to make sure that this project addresses and recognizes the future that we face in terms of climate change, and making sure that we're leveraging our transportation dollars in a responsible way and supporting folks that live and work in the city with bike infrastructure, with pedestrian infrastructure, and with public transportation that is fare-free for folks. So that is what I would hope to do as a member of the council.
Okay, thank you. Owen?
So I live right where it would spill out, and I can attest to the fact that the neighborhood that I live in is a diverse one, and it is going to negatively impact the lives of children and young adults that are constantly outside. These are apartments, but people spend a significant portion of their time outdoors. And I actually have, in addition to the equity and justice issues around safety, I agree that that the project should only come in collaboration with the rail yard project, so that is spilling out down closer to Battery Street than it is right into a residential neighborhood.
Good. Closing statements. Chris, would you like to go first? Sure.
This is a special election. None of us up here were planning on any of this. It just came out of the blue. And when the call came and I was encouraged to run, I was proud to accept the call and stand up and be the voice for conservatives in Ward 3. Our campaign is proposing a positive policing strategy. We will insist upon annual upgrades in sidewalk and water infrastructure because we have to be good stewards to our city and to our lake. It is very important. We are going to put forward actual, workable, actionable solutions on the housing crisis. We will solve this together with bringing multiple vantage points together. We will fight to hold the line on taxes to keep Burlington affordable, because every time taxes go up, our rents are going up. Every time we pass unfunded mandates, our rents are going up. If we want to keep Burlington affordable, we need to keep it affordable for everyone. And we are going to put forward comprehensive plans to try and limit the impacts of homelessness in our society, so that way we can be here to help people experiencing homelessness, to be supportive of them, to encourage them to find housing for them, to make sure they have access to food, medical care, and drug treatment. We're going to get through this together. We're going to build a better Burlington together. I'm Christopher Aaron Felker, and I ask for your vote in the August 17th special election. Thank you.
And Joe?
So I want to thank the Wards 2-3 NPA for hosting this tonight and giving us this space to have this conversation. I'm looking forward to talking to many more folks over the coming weeks. We've got 5 weeks left to Election Day. A lot of you already have your ballots, so I want to make myself as available as possible. I'm running to be a voice for working families in City Hall. Like many, I'm a renter, and I've faced the struggles of finding housing and employment that make it possible for me to even stay in Burlington. And that was a consideration for me getting into the race. Would I be able to find suitable rental housing that would make it possible for me to continue representing Ward 3? I think we need to do a lot more to deliver racial equity in the city. We need to overhaul our boards and commissions process to make it more equitable and ensure that BIPOC folks are involved at every level of our governing structures. And so I think it's time for us to start uplifting working families, marginalized communities, and deliver racial, economic, environmental, and social justice. So I'm running to earn your support. My name's Joe McGee. You can learn more about me at joemcgeebtv.com. That's JoeMageeBTV.com. And I can be reached at 802-279-5513. And I really hope to connect with folks. If I don't show up on your doorstep, I would love to talk to you on the phone. So please don't hesitate to reach out, day or night. Thank you very much.
So I'm really excited to have been able to be here for the Ward 2 and 3 MPA. It's been a great learning experience for me. While I might have lots of experience in community service, I am new to the idea of representing people directly. And as I've come to learn and explore the idea of servant leadership and what that looks like in political service, I have really found it extremely valuable to truly get to know and understand my neighbors. It's shaped the understanding that I have around things related to housing and accessibility and police transformation. And as it relates to my approach to representing people, and when I talk about this idea of servant leadership, it looks and sounds very different. Instead of somebody who's going to be coming to you with a political agenda, I'd be putting people first. Instead of making a Facebook post or something that goes on a diatribe about an issue and says, get on board with how I see things, my approach to engaging people is going to be one of curiosity and genuine interest in understanding what their problems are, and then working really closely to elevate those stories and bringing them to City Council and to the public so that we all have a better understanding of what it looks like. My name is Owen Milne. I'm running as an independent. You can check out my website at owenforburlington.com, and I am excited to get your vote on August 17th.
Great. It is exactly 8 o'clock, and that never happens. I don't want to jinx it. I'm going to thank you all for coming, and I want to emphasize that a large part of your job is actually showing up to the NPA meeting once a month and eating fairly decent food and participating. It is our pleasure to have our councilors and representatives.
Could I have a quick favor? Could all of candidates' websites be on the chat so that people will...
Yes, please, we will, yep. I can't facilitate that because I know nothing about technology, but I'm sure somebody just heard you. But thank you again for coming, and regardless of if you win or you don't win, please keep returning. The NPA is a valuable asset, and in wards 2 or 3, it is extremely valuable, and a lot of us hold it dear. We love to see the repetition of faces is wonderful. That's going to. You're going to do 6 months, right? So you better show up. We have. Quick, give it up. We have one announcement from Perry.
It was just someone had reached out to me to announce that the Old North End Mutual Aid will be hosting a barbecue free food potluck on Saturday, July 17th to connect with community, to learn more about how to get involved in mutual aid. It will be at Roosevelt Park from 4 to 7 p.m.
Excellent. We have a quick comment. Sorry to hold you all up.
So I'm Max Tracy. I'm the Ward 2 City Councilor. Just wanted to let folks know that City Council will be going to be back in person this Monday in Contoy's Auditorium, our first meeting back. And so would welcome anybody who wants to come to the meeting to just join us. I'm really excited to be back in person. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you all again for coming, and we will be back live here 5:30 for community dinner, follow up at 6:37, hopefully 6:30 for our NPA meeting in September. September 9th, to be specific. Thank you. Jess, who does most of the work? Charlie does most of the work. There is not. There is not. There is not. Thanks again. Hopefully see you in September.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, sir.
Oh, no. This is your ward.
How are you doing?
This is your.
Yeah. Thank you.
No, it's tough. It is tough. Well, it's good to see all the Zoom questions too. It's people are watching, so good.
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.